let's move on to something a little bit more positive. And again, I reiterate, if you spoil this for me, I'm never speaking to you again. And we just, set that groundwork. The Boy and the Heron,
You
Miyazaki,
know,
latest film.
do you know the basic plot summary? Just so I know what to say and what not to
No,
say.
I don't. But I'm happy. I'm happy for you to say the basic plot summary. Um, just don't give me any nitty gritties.
So, the Boy and the Heron, supposedly and reportedly, whether or not we believe him or not is a different matter, but supposedly and reportedly, the last ever film by famed Japanese animated director Hayao Miyazaki from the legendary Studio Ghibli production house, who have made some of my favourite animated films and some of, I believe, your favourite animated films of all time. I adore the studio. I'm really biased towards their work. I don't like absolutely everything they've done, but I think they've made just so many classics of the animated genre in general, not just Japanese. So, needless to say, considering this is supposedly his last film and it's just a new Studio Ghibli film anyway, the bar was set very high, as were my expectations. The Boy and the Heron, it centers on a young Japanese boy who has had to flee Tokyo at the start of the Second World War, and go to sort of more a rural area of Japan with his father. In the opening scene, he loses his mother in a bombing, so kind of he is sort of racked with grief, and he is taken to this sort of new, sort of more rural area of Japan with this kind of very large, sprawling property that has a strange tower at one end of it. He's sort of presented with this new stepmother who is very sort of kind and supportive to him, but he's a bit closed off and a bit guarded. He's also stalked by this strange sort of titular heron character that sort of seems to have sort of a mischievous look in its eye. And to say any more would maybe to get into more plot details than is necessary. But what I will say is that strange, fantastical occurrences start to occur, and Mahito must go and search for one of his sort of new family group, which takes him into the spirit world. Now, tonally, this does very much feel like a swan song for Miyazaki, in terms of the film's kind of overall very beautifully melancholic, but also kind of hopeful atmosphere, as well as the themes of grief, reconnecting with loved ones, journey of self-discovery, lost souls regaining a new lease on life, retrospective view of mortality, life, death, cultivating a gratifying existence. All very kind of universal, archetypal, important human and philosophical themes. I was incredibly excited for this film, and there is quite a bit to like in it. It has the spirit world, as is to be expected, is characterized with Ghibli's usual amount of visual grandeur and majesty. It does have this very kind of emotive and moving tone that you would expect from this kind of work. And the animation is in many sequences, just the hand-drawn work is just utterly breathtaking. Kind of has this sort of shimmering dark quality to it in some of the more nightmarish sequences, but this kind of beautifully wistful, soft sort of texture to it in some of the more alleviating and sensitive, delicate moments. Though it started out well and is by no means a bad film, I did like it quite a bit. Considering the bar that I kind of had my expectations at, I must confess to feeling somewhat underwhelmed by the final feature. And based off reading fan reviews and actually just kind of generally listening to people talking about it as I came out of the auditorium, I'm not alone in feeling like this, even though it has had a lot of critical praise heaped on it. Near the start, I was really on board with how much the film was taking its time in establishing this kind of delicately sad mood and how our protagonist is navigating his new home. Much of the film's first movement is kind of sparse on dialogue and with more kind of protracted shot lengths and skeletal but really gorgeous or just plain sort of just spotlit, alone, singular piano chords sort of colouring the score with these short motifs. And this and the typically kind of alluring texture of the hand-drawn animation was a great tone setter and really kind of settled me in for that, warm, poetic Ghibli tone that I kind of know so well and was really looking forward to with this. I was anticipating, based off this kind of opening movement and based off how weird I'd heard, the latter portions of the film got. This really great tonal balancing act between the poetically somber and the bombastically weird. However, there didn't end up being much in the way of tonal or pacing variation, and I thought the film suffered because of that. Once you're in the spirit world, the narrative takes on kind of this road movie-like structure. As the character is kind of moving through these sort of various different sections of this sort of different dimension, and sort of meeting characters along the way who sort of help him at different points and sort of show him aspects of the world as he sort of grows to learn about it. And I must say, the assortment of characters that Mojito meets aren't nearly as distinctive or memorable or vibrant as many from past Ghibli films. I think it lacks a strong central pairing as well. I mean, you do get some time between the boy and the heron, but it doesn't feature nearly as much as I think maybe it could have done to drive home sort of the key themes. It kind of sort of just does a wraparound on some of those at the end with their sort of relationship, and I didn't really feel like it fully reconciled that, or some of its other themes for that matter. I feel like, you think about pairings like the head girl of the village and the main character in Princess Mononoke, or the pair, or Howl and the lead female character in Howl's Moving Castle, or the central pair in Castle in the Sky in Laputa, or the two kids in Ponyo. I think those key sort of pairings are so vital to a Ghibli film's success and driving the plot forward and giving us a point of investment as our character, charges into large-scale fantastical conflicts or emotional shifts in their life. And I felt like this didn't quite have that fully formed. And that would be fine if the main character made up for that development personality-wise. But he's pretty thinly drawn personality-wise, and he's not defined by much other than his grief and being headstrong, and maybe perhaps, more developed, maturity-wise than he needed to be for his age. He doesn't have much to his character beyond that, at least that I could extract. And he doesn't have much agency beyond that either, in terms of him inciting plot development, which I thought was a shame. And much of the story is kind of meandered through with extraneous characters met along the journey, kind of inciting action and story developments, rather than our central figure, learning from or developing through participating in these events himself. I feel like the message and theme becomes muddled by the end. A lot of the lore is quite murky, and I think it clouds the ideas of sort of human growth. And there's plenty of characters that feel like they're there to facilitate a plot point rather than, adding to the action or symbolizing a significant piece of the subtext. And I felt like it was light on action and wondrous sequences that we would normally expect from a Ghibli film. And what we do get isn't quite up to the excitement or poignancy standards of previous films. I really wanted the grounded human drama of the opening to be alternated and fusing with some really go for broke, extravagant weirdness that shook up the tone and shape of the narrative. But it occupies this kind of plateaued, lilting mood through the vast majority of the film, and it kind of makes that 2-hour runtime feel a bit of a drag at times. Though I have to say, there were times where sort of the very sort of soft, poetic nature of sort of the more human story did feel quite emotive, and I did connect to it. This wasn't a total wash for me. I did still like it overall. But I did really feel as though there was the film kind of sacrificed a clear, coherent, concise plot with powerful character development in service of kind of building out a world that didn't, for me, hold a candle in terms of design and heart-rending characters and set pieces to previous works. The ending's quite unceremonious as well. You kind of feel this sense of, or at least I did from the people I was watching the film with, the audience. There was this kind of sense of, is that it? At the end, it kind of just ends. It's not bad ending in terms of what happens. It just feels a little bit abrupt. But I think a lot of what generally there is to like about Studio Ghibli films is on display here. I think considering it's like the farewell, I think I just wanted it to be bigger and grander of an emotional statement, and also just in its visual presentation.
I think people also said that about his last farewell, The Wind Rises. I personally really loved that film. I
I think
kind
it's
of thought
great.
it was quite beautiful in its quietness. And I mean, I'm still okay. As much as I appreciate your thoughts as always. I think there's part of me that's like, there are Ghibli films that fit into um that kind of, there isn't much going on. Most notably, My Neighbor Totoro. There isn't really a plot to My Neighbor Totoro. It's just a kind of group of scenes, and then at the end, one of the kids goes missing out of nowhere, and that's kind of how they wrap it up. And I think it's less about the story and more about the development of the children who are have moved house and how they're learning to kind of adapt to their environment and the nature around them. I think maybe when I go in and when I go watch it this afternoon, I'm kind of bearing in mind that now I know that it's not going to be a kind of conventional like hero's journey. Often it might be a little bit meandering. um I'm going to try and look for those little details where I'm kind of like, what's it trying to do? Because I think some Ghibli films are almost meditative in their kind of presentation. And part of the enjoyment for me of a Ghibli film is the beautiful music, the beautiful visuals, and maybe just letting it take me away with it for a bit. So maybe now that I know how to go in watching it, maybe I'll get a different experience and I'll let you know if that's the case.
Yeah, it is very meditative, and I'd be very interested to hear your thoughts. Um, I think in the case of the Totoro comparison, I feel like with the Boy and the Heron, it kind of just I feel like it doesn't go skeletal. It needed to go more skeletal and more meditative, and and strip things back. I think even further if it really wanted to sort of do that kind of plotless human examination of sort of the emotions it has at the heart of it. I feel like for me personally, I felt like it kind of awkwardly sat in this middle ground and didn't really kind of fully commit to either personally. But that being said, I still think it's very solid. It's probably bottom third of their filmography for me. I know it's very new, but that's kind of personally where I'm kind of just feeling it lands at the moment. I think it's a B plus for me. It's still pretty solid, and I still would say I liked it quite a bit overall. But I think I kind of went in wanting it to be amazing, and I didn't quite feel it hit that mark. But I'd be very interested to hear your experience with it, especially given what I've primed you for.
Right. Nice. Well, we're going to have to move on to our final review of today's episode, and that is Ferrari with Adam Driver. And okay, I've been aware of this film for quite a while. Just because of the job that I do. I've been aware of this film for way too long. And my first thought is, are we going to get a car designer cinematic universe? Because it feels like we've got Ferrari. What was the one we had before?
Ford versus Ferrari. Well, Le Mans '66 in the UK.
Yeah, there was another one as well where it was
Was it Rush?
no, wait. Lamborghini.
Oh yeah, I can't remember
And
what it was called.
well, it's called Lamborghini.
Oh, was it? Very creative.
But I'm sure there were others as well, where it's like, we're gonna have Ford and things like that. Um,
Maserati.
Maserati, yeah, let's get them all on. This has also got Penelope Cruz in it, and I'm
It
a
does.
Penelope Cruz fan. I think she's fantastic. I was like, okay, Adam Driver, Penelope Cruz, that combination sounds good. But I watched the trailer and I was like, Adam Driver seems to recently just be picking films where he has to do the weirdest possible accent.
Oh yes,
I'm
the accent is
interested.
interesting.
What were your thoughts?
So Ferrari, biographical drama based on Enzo Ferrari, mastermind behind the famed car and racing company. This centers around sort of his sort of tumultuous relationship with his wife, played by Penelope Cruz, and his mistress, who bear him a son, played by Shailene Woodley, and also his preparation, because Ferrari at this time in 1957 was a struggling company, and sort of their their build up to this Mille Miglia race, which is a 1,000-mile race, sort of kind of almost like reminds me of the Isle of Man TT race, whereas except not on motorbikes, sort of 1,000 miles across more rural, pedestrianised areas of Italy and sort of rural areas, sort of on non-racing designed roads, sort of very dangerous and very sort of epic in scale. It's directed by Michael Mann, who I'm a great admirer of his work. What you would usually expect from a film from him is, very much on display here. You've got this key conflict on display between a character who is striving very intently for expertise and success in their chosen field at the cost of something resembling a normal and healthy family life. No new territory for a biopic there, but Mann has applied this sort of thematic framework to sports and crime dramas with a level of humanity and, I think, emotional precision. That I think it makes his spin on this usually stand out amongst the cinematic crowd. It's particularly impactful in Heat, which is a favourite of mine amongst crime films and movies in general. He's also known for delivering car chases and shootouts and sports events with this serious tactile grit and realism. As much that as he does big budget Hollywood spectacle. It's a big passion project for him. I think it was in post production in the 90s, and then it sort of went through production hell and has sort of it's been a real battle for this to see the light of day, but he's finally got it here. Unfortunately, there's a very big disparity between the quality of the racing sequences and the quality of, how do we say, everything else. To talk about the racing, they're unsurprisingly really brilliantly helmed. He's not doing this, shutter angle 360 degrees, heightened motion blur frame rate thing that he was doing in Public Enemies and Miami Vice, which I just didn't like at all. Just made everything look like BTS footage. It's back to the normal 24 FPS. It's not overly smooth and cheap and rubbery. It's really visceral and with a ton of forward momentum. It's despite you could film these racing scenes at 200 miles per hour really slickly with a lot of Steadicam, but actually he gets really handheld with it, and I loved that. You really felt like you were in the throttling pace of these cars, and the danger was palpable in these sequences. There's one actually real life famous crash that this film depicts that I didn't know about going into the film, and the entire cinema, I wasn't in a particularly big screen, but the entire screen gasped at how sort of blunt and terrifying and sort of gruesome but not exploitative and tasteless the rendering of this crash scene was. And it sort of really did hit home the risk that the racers and sort of Ferrari, puts these people under. So, you really get a gruff, tactile, physical sense of the damage that's occurring to these cars and to the people driving them and on the sidelines. So terrific stuff there. But unfortunately, much of the rest of the film, outside of the racing, it totally falls apart for me. In the case of Adam Driver's performance, he delivers the most one-note and uninterestingly performance I can remember since John David Washington in Tenet. Never mind the hokey Italian accent. To be fair, he's not alone in that. The rest of the cast aren't up to much good in the dialect department, particularly Shailene Woodley. I think she's saddled with the dodgiest of the bunch. But
I'd just
Adam
like
Driver...
to add an amendment that I quite like John David Washington's performance in Tenet.
Oh, do you? Well,
I do.
oh, well.
I thought he was fine. It's the rest of the film that I didn't like. Sorry, I add that little amendment. I am a Washington fan. I think he's quite good. But
to be fair, I think maybe it was more down to the script giving him no personality. So maybe it was more the script's fault than his fault. But still,
maybe. But yeah, sorry. Yeah. So Adam Driver is flat.
Yes, very flat. Everything is delivered with such little expression and is so monotone that it sucks any personality out of that character. I've read that after the death of his son, the real Enzo Ferrari, he lost a lot of his empathy and became quite cold. So it could well have been like a deliberate creative decision, but I refuse to believe the man had this little emotional range. And my God, it's like watching an android act at times. Like, I don't know if it was a direction thing on Mann's part or just a choice by Driver, but it's so one level all the way through, apart from one scene where he shouts and one scene near the start where he gets a bit tearful at a grave. And I'm just like, it feels like that scene at the start is thrown in just to go, oh look, he has feelings, and like now he's going to be like a total dick for the rest of the film. and that kind of justifies that. Which, yeah, just didn't feel connected to him, didn't like him, and didn't even find him interesting. Very one note. Penelope Cruz is doing her usual constant state of mild to major disgruntlement, solidly as ever. But I've seen her deliver, and I think her accent is probably the best of the bunch. But I've seen her deliver this same performance so many times. It's just not that interesting to me anymore. Like, it doesn't absorb me. Like, it was cool when you did this in Vicky Cristina Barcelona and won the Oscar, but like now it kind of just makes my eyes roll. I'm like, you can do angry well, cool, shocker. Shailene Woodley, she has this really, I feel kind of aggrieved for her. She has this really thankless role as the mistress, and she's given barely anything to do emotionally. Tied in with the ropiest accent in the whole cast, and it sounds like she just wasn't given enough time to prepare, or was saddled with a pretty unmalleable script, and maybe she strikes me as maybe she wasn't directed particularly well by Mann. Yeah, I feel like she was hard done by here. The screenplay doesn't give enough urgency or detail to the mechanics of building the cars or the training regime for the big race to make that side of the story compelling. It doesn't give enough emotional or runtime weight to Enzo's relationship with his wife or his mistress, or his son for that matter. The edits in the many montages aren't all that graceful. There's little sense of rhythm. The transitions in time and general cutting are kind of clunky and without the elegance or barreling energy you would want from an edit in a story about motor racing or a biopic for that matter, a slickly produced biopic, because this certainly isn't slickly produced, or at least not in the human scenes and the montages. And this was actually a real shock to me. It's quite bizarre. I'd be really interested to see if anyone else will pick up on this. The film, at least to my eye and ears, was littered with technical issues that I would not expect in a film with a $95 million budget. I just wouldn't. There are these Steadicam shots that pan really awkwardly, gimbal push-ins that literally shake up and down as they're moving in, movement that doesn't even feel like it's intentional on the operator's part. You get these really awkward focus pulls that are clumsy at best, and at worst, they don't even fully pull for a brief moment. It's like the character's still kind of out of focus, and then it kind of lapses back in. It's really strange, and it's not like that can be intentional. Shallow depth of field and all that sort of stuff. But it just didn't. It was distracting. It just didn't feel like it was meant to be there, and this arguably could have been the cinema, but it was too random and specific of an issue. If it was a consistent volume issue on the dialogue, I would have said, oh, that was just the screen. But it honestly didn't feel like that. There were dialogue scenes where the tracks were muffled whilst others weren't. There was a disparity in volume between the cars and the characters' lines, dialogue tracks that change volume in between shots and are sometimes different for each actor. Just bizarre and kind of head-scratching, technical oversights that just didn't. They didn't seem like the fault of the cinema. They seemed like blemishes on the actual film to me, and it just not impressed by that at all. Yeah, just disappointed by this one. I know some people have taken to it, and I know some critics have, somewhat liked it and said, yeah, it's a mixed bag, but overall it's pretty good. I don't think that way. I actually think it ends up being quite poor for a lot of the reasons I've mentioned so far. I think we're feeling another C- on this one.
And that wraps up our first episode back. Well, I think we've had a pretty good collection. I think we've had some ups and downs in this one. What would you say is your favourite out of that bunch? What would be your biggest recommendation?
Despite my reservations with it, I would still say my favourite is handily The Boy and the Heron. I would generally recommend people stay away from Leave the World Behind and Ferrari. Wonka, which I'm kind of indifferent to, around sort of a B- C+ kind of range. I think it's perfectly fine to put that one on. There are parts of it that are certainly very magical and very entertaining. Imaginative set pieces that will get the kids excited. But I would say those two, seek them out. They're kind of worth a cursory watch. But the other two, I would say you don't need to waste your time with those.
And that's everything. So Next week, we've got a big one. It's going to be Billy's best films of 2023. Are you excited?
I'm very excited. I'm looking forward to like finally just chalking up my thoughts, seeing Poor Things, seeing if that fits into the equation based on all that's been said about it so far, and just sort of doing a couple little final rewatches and reviewing my list and giving you the lowdown on what to look back on from the previous cinematic year.
All right, and that's it from us. So please subscribe to our new YouTube channel, which we've just set up. So we're going to be putting a few extra little bits on there. And yeah, keep listening over the next year for more fantastic reviews. And we will see you then. Bye.
See you in the next episode. Thank you for listening. Bye.